They fired me on a Wednesday. No warning, no write-up, just a quiet little ambush in a side room next to the copy machine. I walked in with a coffee, thinking it was a meeting. I walked out with a severance envelope and a smile from the man who'd just ended my career. My name's Daniel Reed. I'm 34, born in Ohio, raised on football, Fords, and the idea that if you worked hard enough, people noticed. I went to school for industrial engineering, took a job in operations, and clawed my way up the ladder like every other guy with a mortgage and something to prove. I've always been a behind-the-scenes kind of man. Quiet, efficient, just enough social skills to avoid HR complaints. I don't like politics, and I don't play games. But that morning, I realized someone else had been playing one the whole time, and I'd been cast as the fall guy. Roger Haskins, my direct manager, barely looked me in the eye as he slid the envelope across the table. "We're restructuring," he said. "Your role's been deemed redundant." That word, redundant, landed like a slap. Redundant meant unnecessary, replaceable, disposable. He used it like he was reading from a script, and maybe he was. I stared at him for a few seconds, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Just that thin smirk on his face, like this was personal, and he'd finally won whatever game he thought we were playing. But here's the thing. Up until 2 weeks earlier, I'd been outperforming every benchmark they set for me. I'd found bottlenecks in the system no one else had seen and cut waste that saved 6 figures a month. I was even mentoring 2 junior analysts on my own time. No complaints, no write-ups. So this wasn't about my performance. It was about something else, something political. And Roger had wanted me gone for months. I just hadn't seen it until it was too late. I left the building without saying goodbye to anyone, just kept my head down, badge in hand, and walked past the front desk like a ghost. My car felt colder than usual. I sat there for 20 minutes before turning the key. It wasn't until I got home that I let myself breathe. My wife, Jenna, met me at the door. She didn't even need to ask. She just pulled me into a hug. We'd been through tough years before, and she knew better than to sugarcoat it. "They fired the wrong guy," she whispered into my shoulder. I wanted to believe her, but in the back of my mind, something darker stirred. A question I couldn't shake. What if they fired me not because I was failing, but because I was getting too close to something? What if I was never supposed to be there long enough to see what I saw? Because the truth is, I wasn't just some operations guy. I was the silent owner, the CEO's son, and no one in that office had a clue. My father built that company from scratch, not in the metaphorical way people say, built from nothing, but literally. He started with a rented garage, a second-hand Dell, and a beat-up Ford truck. I grew up sweeping warehouse floors and eating vending machine dinners while he worked late into the night. He didn't believe in handouts, said real work builds real men. So when I turned 26 and asked him for a job, he said no. Instead, he told me, "If you want to earn your place here, disappear. Work your way up through another name. No one can know who you are, not even middle management. I want you to see how this place really runs." That's how Daniel Reed was born. My real last name's Harper. But no one knew that, not even the HR department. Only my father, the board chair, and the legal team knew the truth, and they were bound tight by non-disclosures. For the past 14 months, I'd been embedded as a mid-level operations analyst, pulling data, proposing improvements, and trying not to blow my cover. It was supposed to be a 2-year internal audit, a kind of real-world MBA before I stepped into a leadership role. Then my dad had a heart attack. It happened just 6 weeks before Roger fired me. One moment he was chairing meetings and talking strategy over bourbon. The next, he was lying in a hospital bed with wires in his chest, and a doctor saying things like mild cardiac episode. The board asked him to step down temporarily, and he agreed, on one condition: that I stay in place. quiet, watching, reporting directly to him. But without my father in the spotlight, the snake started slithering out from the woodwork. Roger moved fast, consolidating influence, shifting budget approvals, rerouting vendor contracts. He made it look like smart, decisive leadership. But I saw the rot, inflated invoices, bogus consulting agreements, vendors that didn't exist last quarter. And when I started tracing the trail, I realized the money wasn't vanishing. It was being laundered. Quietly. Systematically. Someone was bleeding the company from the inside out. And the moment Roger sensed I was getting close, I was out. I should have seen it coming, but part of me thought I was still safe. That some invisible line would protect me. That being the founder's son, even in secret, meant something. It didn't. Roger didn't just want control, he wanted everything, and I was in the way. But here's where he miscalculated. Firing me might have gotten me out of the building, but it didn't get me out of the company. I still held 28% ownership in Class A shares, more than enough to call a shareholder meeting if I wanted, more than enough to dig into the books. And thanks to a small clause in the company bylaws, I had one more card to play: temporary executive authority in the absence of the CEO or majority board consensus. All I needed was proof. Concrete, bulletproof evidence, and a plan to take him down publicly, legally, and permanently. So I called an old friend. Ethan Brooks was the kind of guy you didn't call unless you were serious. We met back in college. He was 2 years older, sharp as a scalpel, and already working freelance IT security gigs while the rest of us were learning Excel shortcuts. After graduation, he built a reputation as a quiet fixer in the cybersecurity world. The guy CEOs called when they suspected their CFO was cooking the books, or when a merger needed quiet digital surveillance. We hadn't talked in nearly 3 years, but when I called, he answered on the second ring. "What kind of mess are we talking?" he asked, no small talk. "The kind that's buried under shell companies, fake vendors, and someone trying to steal an entire business," I said. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "So, corporate war crimes. You always did like the quiet battles." We met 2 days later in a rented co-working office downtown, far from any place Roger or his cronies would look. I brought everything I had: emails, purchase orders, shipping logs, even screenshots from the internal finance portal. Ethan brought a laptop, 3 USB sticks, and a duffel bag that looked suspiciously like it had once belonged to someone in the military. He worked in silence for nearly 4 hours, his fingers a blur, pausing only to ask for Wi-Fi passwords, or if I had access to anything else. Credit card statements, personal emails, physical access cards. Anything that left a footprint. Around hour 5, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "You were right to be suspicious. Some of these invoices are recycled from older transactions. Different amounts, same line items. It's sloppy, but just smart enough to fly under surface-level audits." He showed me a dashboard he'd built in real time. Red flags lit up across multiple departments: procurement, logistics, and even HR. "Roger's not working alone," Ethan said. "There's a network here. At least 3 internal accomplices, possibly more. The kicker? A lot of the contracts are being funneled through a holding company registered under a fake executive in Nevada. Guess whose name is on the email domain's recovery address?" "Roger?" I guessed. Ethan nodded. "It's not enough to convict, but it's enough to start shaking the tree." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a cover-up or power grab. It was a hostile takeover in slow motion. Roger was bleeding the company dry, moving money offshore through consulting fronts, and setting himself up for a golden parachute escape while the rest of us were left with the wreckage. If I hadn't been fired, I might have missed the scope of it. Ironically, Roger had given me distance, and in doing so, he gave me clarity. We built a secure digital vault of everything Ethan found and backed it up twice. One copy in the cloud, the other on a hard drive Ethan kept on him at all times. We weren't just gathering evidence. We were building a case airtight enough to take to the board, or to the SEC if it came to that. But before we did, I needed one more thing. I needed someone inside. Finding someone on the inside who hadn't already sold their soul to Roger wasn't easy. After what Ethan and I uncovered, I started looking at everyone differently. Every email, every signature on a budget approval, every just following orders shrug in the hallway. They all felt like cracks in a dam that had already started to break. But there was one person I couldn't shake from my mind. Madison Clark, junior financial analyst. Sharp, quiet, detail-obsessed, with a memory like a steel trap. I remembered how she used to ask uncomfortable questions in meetings, the kind that made managers shift in their seats. People underestimated her because she didn't talk much, but I'd seen her pull apart a bad forecast in 5 minutes and correct a senior exec's math without breaking a sweat. More importantly, she owed Roger nothing. He passed her over for a promotion last year, chose a guy who played golf with him instead. I reached out through her personal email, careful with my wording. Nothing specific, just a friendly message from a former co-worker wanting to grab coffee and talk shop. She agreed to meet the next day. Neutral ground, corner cafe, no digital footprint. I showed up early. She showed up even earlier. "Daniel," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her eyes were cautious but not cold. "This about your firing?" "Partly," I said, "but it's bigger than that. I need your help." I didn't dump everything at once. I gave her pieces, enough to raise eyebrows, not alarms, a few fishy invoices, a timeline that didn't add up, a consulting firm that billed 6 figures for workflow integration and never showed up on site. I watched her reactions closely. She didn't flinch. Instead, she opened her own laptop, pulled up some spreadsheets she'd archived out of habit, and pointed to a pattern in budget reallocations. "I've seen this," she said. "Small numbers, shuffled weekly, always landing in departments that don't track their own spending." "But I thought it was just sloppy accounting." "It's not sloppy," I told her. "It's strategic." She sat back, folding her arms. "So why me?" "Because you see things," I said, "and because I think you already know something's off. I need someone still inside to confirm what we're finding, quietly. No paper trail, just eyes and ears." She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'll help. But if we do this, I want 2 things. Immunity if this blows up, and a seat at the table when it's over." I didn't hesitate. Deal. From that point on, Madison became our eyes inside the belly of the beast. Every night she sent encrypted updates, internal memos, calendar invites, contract drafts. She even recorded a few hallway conversations where Roger bragged about cleaning house and making the company leaner for acquisition. That last part stopped me cold. Acquisition? Roger wasn't just stealing, he was selling. The word acquisition hit like a freight train. I reread Madison's message 3 times, heart pounding like a drum. The file she'd sent, an internal memo drafted but not yet circulated, was a high-level proposal to explore strategic purchase options from a private equity firm I recognized immediately. Ellingson Capital, ruthless reputation, known for buying undervalued businesses, gutting them and flipping what was left. The kind of firm that turned legacies into liquidation sales. If Roger was lining up a deal with them, he wasn't just trying to take over. He was planning to burn the place down and cash out. That changed everything. I called Ethan the next morning. "We need to move," I said, "fast." Over the next 72 hours, we assembled what we called the packet. It was a meticulous, idiot-proof case. Documentation of the fake vendors, money trails, audio clips of Roger implicating himself, and projections of what the acquisition would do to company valuation. Ethan even dug up proof that Roger had purchased property in the Cayman Islands through a trust, clearly preparing his exit. We sent the packet to 2 places at once: the company's outside legal counsel and the interim board chair, an old friend of my father's, Margaret Lee. She hadn't been part of the day-to-day in years, but her name still carried weight in the right rooms. I didn't tell her everything in the email, just that we had an urgent financial misconduct concern and that I was invoking my right as a Class A shareholder to call an emergency board meeting. 12 hours later, she replied with 4 words. "I've seen enough. Proceed." The meeting was set for Friday, 10 a.m., at the executive offices. Not virtual, in person. That was Margaret's rule. "If someone's about to get crucified," she once told me, "they don't deserve the mercy of a mute button." Roger had no idea it was coming. I spent the day before the meeting holed up in Ethan's office, going over every piece of evidence, every timeline, every legal clause. We didn't just want to confront Roger, we wanted to remove him with cause. That meant proving he was a liability to the company, both financially and reputationally. We were ready. Hell, we were over-prepared. But that night, as I sat in my car outside the boardroom building, staring at the empty lot across the street, a strange emotion crept in beneath the adrenaline. Grief. Because for all the rot, the politics, and the betrayal, I loved that company. Not the bureaucracy or the execs, but the idea of it. What it stood for when my father built it. The people who still showed up every day and believed they were part of something real. I'd walked those halls since I was 12, hid behind filing cabinets, watched my dad shake hands and close deals with nothing but trust and grit. Tomorrow, I would burn a part of it to the ground to save the rest. And I wouldn't be walking in as Daniel Reed, the fired analyst. I'd be walking in as Daniel HARPER, rightful heir, and acting CEO. The boardroom was quiet when I stepped in. Too quiet. 9 people around the polished oak table, half of them glancing at their watches, the rest giving me polite nods, unsure why the guy they thought had been fired was walking in with a portfolio and a straight back. Roger wasn't there yet. Typical. He liked to make an entrance, especially when he thought he was winning. I took a seat near the middle, facing the head of the table. Margaret Lee sat there like royalty. Calm, unreadable, hands folded neatly. She gave me a single nod. That was all the permission I needed. 10 minutes later, Roger strolled in, all smiles and cologne. "Margaret, always a pleasure," he said, before his eyes landed on me. The smile froze. "Daniel?" he said, confused. Then a flicker of disdain. "This is a closed session. You're not—" "I am," I said calmly, opening my folder. "Class A shareholder. 34% now, actually. My father's emergency proxy passed to me last week. You'd know that if you'd bothered to read the bylaws you keep trying to rewrite." The room went still. Roger opened his mouth, but Margaret raised a hand. "He's within his rights, Roger, and I think we'd all like to hear what he has to say." So I laid it out. Every invoice, every shell company, the hidden accounts, the pre-acquisition memo, the audio clips, the Cayman property. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. The weight of it was louder than any shouting match. Roger's face changed with every page. First red, then white, then nothing at all. When I finished, no one spoke for a moment. Then Margaret leaned forward. "Roger," she said, her voice steady as steel, "do you deny any of this?" He tried, of course, fumbled out a few lines about restructuring and miscommunication, but it was hollow. The board didn't buy it. Ethan's digital trail was too clean. Madison's testimony too detailed. my evidence too damning. In the end, he stood up, puffed out his chest one last time, and said, "You think you're saving this place? It's a dinosaur. You'll thank me in a year." I looked him square in the eye. "I'll thank you now for showing me exactly what I never want to become." They removed him that morning, officially terminated for cause pending legal review. Security escorted him out of the building. He didn't look back. By the afternoon, the news had spread like wildfire, internally and to a few external partners. We delayed the acquisition indefinitely, launched a full audit, and brought in compliance to clean house. Madison got promoted to senior finance lead, with a seat in every executive meeting. Ethan? I gave him a long-term consulting contract and an office with no windows, just how he likes it. As for me, I didn't take the CEO title, not yet. I asked the board for 6 months to rebuild from within, quietly, anonymously. One more tour through the trenches. This time not to expose corruption, but to earn trust. Because this company may be mine by blood, but it's only worth something if I'm willing to bleed for it.